I really hate that this internship on recommendation of the alumni. Alumni is kind of like.
I forgot about that.
You guys ready? I like Baltic College over here. You guys done? All right, folks, I'm going to call the meeting to order. If you want to have a seat. All right, before we get started, if you can make sure you silence your cell phones. We'll give members of the audience an opportunity to ask questions or make comment after each presentation before we make any recommendations. Excuse me. And it'll be time for public comment at the end of the meeting. So that being said, first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November meeting. Any corrections, changes?
I have none. I have none.
Good. All in favor?
I
Make a motion
Aye.
to
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
approve
sorry.
the minutes from the November 12th meeting.
I'll second that.
There's a lot going on and I'm trying to keep it on. All right, so we got a proper second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So no action on any plans?
No.
Okay. All right, so we've signed the Mylars, so we will get to our first applicant, Telford Borough Authority.
I don't think anyone's here right now.
Oh.
Telford or CKS. Maybe we move them to the end if they
Okay.
show up later.
Yep.
If not, I could explain to you then.
That'd be great. All right, so second on the agenda would be CSAC. This here is closer to you with it. I know that we have a plan on the paper also.
Good evening. Nate Fox and Scott Meese on behalf of the applicant for tax parcel 52-9-133-1 on Forest Road. The plan, which I believe you have in front of you, shows a 9,750 square foot building. Everything, Mr. Bowles' letter is a will comply, other than the waivers. We did want to note, comment number 1, there is going to be no outside storage. So everything will be inside the building. So we'll make that clear and no issue complying with that. One question I think we wanted to resolve is comment number 2A. Regarding the perimeter buffering areas. Next to the existing residence, we're showing a newly installed buffer compliant with the zoning ordinance. However, there's a rather large existing wooded area and a lot of area to the rear of the property. I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense to add additional buffering there. And Scott, is there anything that we would be concerned about, or is there any benefit to adding additional buffering to the rear of the parking lot?
No, and that's what Steve Bella's comment about the landscaping. It's perimeter landscaping for a parking area. We're showing a parking area behind the building. This is Forest here. The building is right here, and parking behind it. And at the lower end of the parking lot are 7 parking spaces. And those parking spaces in the ordinance calls for buffering. And we are having a 25-foot buffer for the residents on the east side. We got about 100-foot thick woods behind the parking, and we are proposing a tree here. We're actually proposing 4 trees around the parking. So I know your ordinance does talk about the fact that if there is some existing vegetation that would satisfy the buffer requirement, that can be approved by the board, and we don't have to do anything. Don't have to take trees down and put trees up, type of thing.
Yeah, I sort of misspoke in my letter that it was a waiver. It's not exactly a waiver. It's in the zoning ordinance. But there's a section in the zoning ordinance that says the township can accept existing vegetation in lieu
Okay.
of certain plantings. So
Right.
it's really just a question of if you're comfortable with the parking being screened behind the building and plus having woods behind the parking.
It seems to make sense to me.
Do they need to document anywhere that those woods won't be cleared later? Since we're counting that as buffering.
We'd be willing to put a note on the plan for that because the ordinance actually does address that.
Anyone else?
Are those thick enough to count as a buffer? Existing woods?
They are for the parking buffer because the parking buffer is only the lower shrubs.
Okay, gotcha.
Lights and things.
Yeah.
It's not like a separation between residential and non.
Gotcha.
All right, and then that brings us to the waivers. We're looking at 5 waivers in section 3A, from section 35 or 36522C, regarding preparation of a traffic impact study. We have one or two employees tops at the facility, and a 9,750 square foot building. We don't think that meets the threshold for requiring a traffic study. Hope the planning commission would agree with that. 3B, from Saldo sections 365, 31M and 365, 32D1 regarding drainage improvements, and cartway overlay along the frontage. Scott, do you mind walking through what we're doing versus what's being asked of us?
Well, we're just asking.
For waiver from
Yeah,
the requirement.
From the requirement for any roadway widening, because this is such a minor land development. It's a small building and it's basically a one employee business.
So functionally about the same traffic as if it would be a residence almost.
Even less.
Less.
Steve, how far is this from the last one we saw at the corner of Forest and Old Bethlehem? No?
It's quite a distance from there because
Okay.
it's closer to the intersection with Old Mill. But it is in that new PC2 zone.
Right. Is there a fee in lieu for that waiver?
There'd be a fee in lieu for any of the street improvement waivers.
And what about the future, the future, requires, for consideration for future improvement?
Well, that's the question that you need to wrestle with is, you want to start the precedent to build improvements along the road as the property is developed, or
Right, and
you anticipate that ultimately the road will need to be widened because of future development. You may want to require some of that now. If you're comfortable deferring the whole thing, that's a policy decision.
I guess my question again would be the fees in lieu, would that work toward a contribution toward future improvements?
It can. We've had this discussion before. The way the township administers it, it goes into a general road improvement fund, not a fund specific to this property or this street.
Right.
But those funds could be used on this street, or future funds that are received could be used on this street.
My biggest concern is 10 years down the road, what's the cost of doing these improvements going to be compared to what the fee in lieu of is now?
It's a good consideration. Yeah, thoughts, John?
Well, I think, as they pointed out, it's a residence on the one side.
Yeah.
So that would kind of cut down on the commercial development potential within the next 10 years for at least that property. And I don't know if this area is going to grow that fast that doing any improvements now isn't going to do anything other than stick out like a sore thumb until something else comes along.
Saying the same thing.
And one option my client just offered, if the township would take a fee in lieu, they're not supposed to double dip and come back and say, you have to do this now, but what my client's offering is to put a deferral and a note on the plan that if and when there are roadway improvements required along that frontage, that could be a future obligation of the property owner.
It's similar to what we did on Ridge Valley, right?
We've done it once or twice before.
And sorry to, I don't mean to speak, it's a policy question, I think, for the township. Would the township rather have a fee in lieu and then potentially have that money be allocated elsewhere and, or have a property owner on the hook to do the improvements if and when there is, improvement required to Forest Road?
And I think that's not necessarily a question planning commission has
Fair.
to answer. Your question would be, if you think there's improvements that should be required now, that would be your recommendation. Whether it's, if you don't think they need to be installed now, whether it's a fee in lieu of or a deferral is an issue for the manager and the board of
Right.
supervisors.
Yeah. Yeah, with that in mind, I don't see a need to.
What's the length of the frontage? Do you
Yeah, it's
know?
about 250.
Okay.
229 feet.
If it were the corner property, I
Right.
disagree with you because we have issues at that intersection.
Right.
We're away from the intersection.
All right, so it sounds like we're in agreement that we'd be willing to waive that.
And the waiver C from 365-39 and 40 for curb and sidewalk, that's the same concept.
Correct.
So, and Mike, deferral on that would be acceptable as well, to tag responsibility of the property owner that if and when that was required, we could put a note on the record plan and include that in the recorded development agreement as well.
You all right with that?
Yes.
And then item D, section 365-49E1, installation of perimeter curb and raised beds around the parking lot. And Scott, we're just proposing asphalt at grade because of the limited size and almost no traffic.
Yeah, and it's behind the building. You're having the buffer and existing buffering that's there to the south, to the east, and then also having the stormwater basin is located in a very low point of the property in your rear. And so, you know, in compliance with some of DEP standards, we have overland runoff from the building and the parking lot will run overland, have a chance to throw it in the ground before it even gets back to the stormwater.
And if there were curb, it would make a channel and that would change the stormwater impact, correct?
Any thoughts on that, Steve?
I don't have an objection to the waiver on the small parking lot with the drainage that's proposed.
Anyone?
Okay.
No issue.
Go ahead.
All right, and the last waiver, I'm going to phone a friend. I'm going to ask for Scott because I'll very quickly get into engineering speak, which I don't do well. This is from section 355-18N4A3 regarding basin slopes. Scott, do you mind in lay terms what we're asking for?
Sure, yeah, your ordinance calls for detention basins down 4 to 1 size. This is a very shallow basin. I think it's 1.5 feet, 2 feet at the deepest point per measure for 3 to 1, which is kind of typical grading for this type of small basin.
Yeah. I know we've done this before and it sounds pretty benign. I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think you've had more concern in the past in residential properties
Right.
and areas.
And everything else in the letters of will comply, but wanted to call your attention to comment number 7, recreation land or fee in lieu. We're proposing a fee in lieu, which the amount comes out to be pretty nominal because the formula is based on $500 per 400 square feet of building, but we'll pay the fee. And everything else is will comply. We do note, we are proposing a holding tank. So we'll have to, of course, deal with the county health department on that. But it's such a limited limited number of people and limited impact. We're hopeful that that's relatively easy to deal with, but everything else is will comply.
And just to call out, it's noted in the letter that is in the public service area for water and sewer with PRA. So if and when they get their lines that far north, the property be expected to be
Will be-
connected.
Connecting.
You go back to number 5.
Yes, sir.
Noted that you don't have any lighting at the entrance. I think we've been making an informal policy for commercial uses to have some type of lighting at the entrance.
Got some sort of security lighting or
Just or some type of a pole or on your.
Noting the
sign.
driveway
Just to-
entrance,
just to
yeah.
denote the driveway entrance.
yeah, and
A lamp.
Is there any proposal for a sign or something?
But the sign's in the center of the property, right? It's not at the entrance.
Yeah, it's just lamp post type of.
Yeah, not necessarily an overhead
Something-
street light.
Yeah, something that's not going to impact the neighbors, but gives at least security
delineates.
and also know where there is a driveway.
Is it sign lighted?
You know what type of sign you're gonna use yet?
Or down the road, I'm sure it'll have, if it's lit a very small light, I don't, it's not really a business sign.
Right.
For delivery.
Well, The ordinance will determine what type of lighting you can use.
Yeah, and Steve had noted in his letter that, a standard note to the plan that we have to get a zoning permit for the sign.
Right. All right, so what are we looking for tonight?
We're hoping for a recommendation for preliminary as final.
All right, well, first we have to vote on the waivers.
Public comment first?
Yeah, any public comment on this project? Okay, thank you. Someone want to make a motion to approve the waiver, or recommend the waiver?
Make the motion to recommend waivers.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Is there any reason not to grant a preliminary final tonight? Seems like everything's in order.
Any thoughts on your part, Steve?
No, if it's, they're agreeing to everything in the letter, I don't have anything else to add.
One question,
Yeah,
Chris. So
absolutely.
it's under submission, it's both based here in accordance with township policy. Shouldn't be placed on agenda until proof of notification is submitted. Is that all?
They had the notifications, they just didn't give them to us. And when they got the letter, they provided us with the notification, so they were done.
Gotcha.
Should've-
All right, so someone want to make a motion to recommend preliminary final for this project?
Make a motion to recommend preliminary final for this project.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Culper didn't show up yet?
No,
See anyone now?
Nope. Probably gonna have to wait a while then. All right.
don't think they're coming, but
All right, Benaya Durstein. You are up.
I'm back again. Good evening again. Believe we were here previously for perhaps a zoning hearing board application or a sketch plan prior to the property changing hands. Benaya is the owner of the property. This is Zach Durstein. This is going to be a cold storage facility. If Alex, do we know what page the plan's on? Just want to walk second sheet. Thank you. Walk through. So Meeting House Road, SEPTA, 309 Old State Road. There's a significant grade drop off from Old State Road down to the bottom of the property. So the property is actually being cut in significantly, and there will be a see the retaining wall shown in the plan. So the warehouse, cold storage facility actually sits down grade, so it's going to be less impactful to the surrounding community. You can also see significant buffering, so I don't think there's much more room to plant trees on the property if we wanted to. But generally, employee parking here, primary single point of access on the driveway and the truck court and loading area to the rear towards the railroad. We did get some zoning relief, but otherwise, other than waivers, I believe we're all will comply, but have a few discussion items. And Alex, did I miss anything of relevance? Talk through the layout of the plan. No, before we go into waivers, does the planning commission have any questions?
I don't at this point. I probably will as we cruise through this review.
Sure. So section 8, so everything's will comply or historical comments on the application before this. So section 8A regarding the waivers, section 365, 32D1, 39A, and 40A from cartway widening, curb, and sidewalk installation along the old state road frontage. The frontage of the property here, we're not taking access or doing anything. The old state road, that's pretty much the Shelley's driveway to the rear. So we've asked to sit with the manager and Steve and talk through a fee in lieu from that waiver, as don't know if there's any sense improving a dead end street, and think that fee in lieu is probably the way to go there. From 8B, sidewalk installation along the Meeting House Road frontage. This would really be a sidewalk to nowhere. And we don't want pedestrian activity necessarily on the same property as a warehouse. There's not a place to have pedestrians come or go from. So again, we're proposing a fee in lieu, and that would be, instead of putting sidewalk along this area here. Item C, 36541A, from street trees. We're asking for a different mix. And Alex, do you mind filling in the blank what we're doing versus or proposing versus what is required?
Yeah, we're proposing the correct number of street trees. There's two concerns. One, there's some overhead power lines. We're asking to use ornamental trees are slightly smaller and lower than full street trees, just with potential conflict with the overhead lines. And then also one of the topics during the zoning hearing discussion was improving the buffer along Meeting House. Your street tree ordinance promotes deciduous trees. We're looking to put some evergreens in there as well to help with screening that was requested part of the zoning hearing. So we're proposing a number of trees. We're just asking for a waiver instead of using full-size deciduous shade trees to do a mix of shade trees, ornamental trees, and evergreen trees.
They were always close.
Yes, there's a majority of spruce, especially in the southern portion of the below the driveway, which is the truck area, which I think is the area where the most of the screening is requested.
So it's the required number, just a different composition.
Any response to the county's comment about the white pine?
White pines are mostly to the rear of the property along the railroad track, but we want to get rid of white pine, but we're sprucing. We're in discussion on the landscape plan overall with some of the neighbors to talk about, their thoughts on the screening. Everyone wants to get rid of the white pines and increase the number of spruce. We'll look at that. I think the only concern is the ordinance doesn't want any more than 40% of one species to avoid monoculture. So we want to make sure there's still enough diversity in there, but we can look at alternate.
Is a robust buffer a fair characterization of what we'll have here?
And I think that the plan, you can see the amount of trees we're trying to put in the top. About how much screening we're doing.
Comment as neighbors or just wait to the end?
You gotta wait till the end, I'm sorry.
Next, item D, Saldo section 36541B, parking area shading. We're asking for 15.41% versus 35. Do you mind walking through on the plan where those areas are that wouldn't have shading?
Yeah, and the standard is, as you know, parking lot shading criteria, but it applies both to parking lots and loading docks. The difference is in parking lots, you have places for landscape islands at the end of parking rows. For a functional warehouse loading dock, you need 170 feet, 150 feet of pavement, and you can't really put a landscape island in the middle of it to plant a tree in the middle of the loading dock. So the bulk of the deficit in the parking lot shading is in the loading dock portion of the property, just by the operational needs of a warehouse functional loading dock. The one item that we spoke about with the applicant, and I believe it was requested in the meeting or in the letter, is if they would agree to do a light colored roof, a white roof on the building in lieu of the parking lot shading or in support of the waiver, and we are amenable to that. With the inability to put trees in the middle of a loading dock, we can't make the calculation.
I know we've requested concrete as well with the white roof wherever possible and the
Yeah, and if
parking
you
lot.
see on the rendering, this yellow tan color is the concrete and the gray is the asphalt. So we are proposing the concrete in the actual truck bays themselves, and then it would be asphalt. Yeah. So we would agree to the white roof on the building and the concrete is shown on this one.
And the lower concrete strip is for the pads on trailer storage.
Yeah, that's the trailer storage. So that would be where the support for the trailers rest.
Right, then waiver item 8E from Saldo section 36541G, replacement trees. Permit evergreen, ornamental, and shrubs instead of the canopy trees. I think this is similar to the same.
Argument as the original one. But the pushes for deciduous trees, and we're looking for a mix of ornamental, deciduous, and evergreen.
But this has nothing to do with overhead lines.
I mean, some of the planning is in and around those same areas, but the issue is more about being able to mix in the evergreens to get the screening that was requested both
Right.
along the railroad and Meeting House. And then also we do about 309, so we do want some evergreens there as well for buffering from.
And I should have noted at the outset, you're looking about 104,000 square foot building with some additional expansion potentially, which is why nothing is shown in this area. This would be the potential expansion area, which is consistent with the zoning plan. I think page 3 of the plans has the potential expansion area, but we're not seeking approval for that. But this has been roughly designed to allow for it. But if my client would want to expand the building in the future, we'd have to, of course, come back in for land development approval for the expansion.
Just curious, 36541G talks about the minimum caliper of the tree, not the species.
Yeah, but I believe, yeah, deciduous trees are typically sized by caliper, whereas evergreen trees are sized by height. So, an evergreen tree is usually spec'd at 6 to 8 foot tree, whereas a deciduous tree is spec'd at a 2.5 inch caliper tree. So with the change in the use, the nomenclature as far as how the tree is spec'd, might be different.
So, and the difference between function as a buffer for a deciduous tree versus an evergreen is going to give you a top to bottom buffer and full year, where the deciduous tree, the leaves will come off, and you'll also have below the canopy, you'll have a gap.
Understood.
Next, item F, Saldo section 36541H, 20% afforestation requirement. I think a lot of these are going to sound similar to permit other required plantings to be considered in lieu of the additional afforestation plantings due to lack of space. Can you put some color on that, Alex, as to what that means?
I mean, the goal is for the 20% afforestation criteria. The way we kind of view this waiver, if you look at going south of the driveway along this portion of Meeting House, then along the railroad, and then up along 309. That's roughly 20% of the site area if you just take the green space that we've planted. We believe, though the spec is for a bare root plan or a sapling, whatever you refer to it as, being, reforested in 20% of the portion of the property. The way we view this planting plan is that perimeter buffer along Meeting House, Railroad, and 309 is a dense buffer, and that equates to about 20% of the site area. So we believe the intent of the ordinance to quote unquote afforest that area or density plan is met by this plan, and we're looking to allow this planting plan to meet the intent of that standard.
Steve, you agree with that logic?
Indirectly. Right, it does have a specific meaning to turn it back into a wooded or generally unkept area, not lawn with trees growing in it. That said, I don't disagree with his description of the amount of plantings that they're putting in that area. This keeps coming up on the larger commercial properties. It works better on the residential properties and where there's an open space area that we can replant.
Yeah,
It does not. It's not exactly conducive to the larger commercial properties.
We done a fee in lieu of in the past on these?
Yeah, we equated, the amount of trees that would require this small, whip trees. If you replanted that, we put a dollar amount on.
So we'll add that to our fee and lieu discussion with the Old State Road improvements and the sidewalk along Meeting House.
I do want to circle back to that question though. Once we get through this, I want to talk about sidewalk.
Item G, Saldo Section 365-43 A and B, to increase graded slopes from a maximum of 4-to-1 to 3-to-1. Do you mind highlighting on the plan, Alex, where that condition would occur?
It's isolated, limited to the area on the south of the loading dock up against the railroad. We were able to get 4-to-1 slopes on all the areas adjacent to the parking lot and the entrance on Meeting House, but with the required width of the loading dock. As was noted, the site is, I believe it's 35 feet of fall from Old State to the railroad. So basically the driveway is the midpoint of the site, and that's basically level where the building sits. And there's 10 or 15 foot of cut on the top side and 10 or 15 foot of fill on the bottom side. So we have to pad out the loading court. And with the proximity of the railroad, the slope from the back of the trailer stalls down to the railroad is 3-to-1. The code speaks to concerns about, there is the code permits exceeding that as long as there's not a risk to a washout taking a road out of commission or sliding down into a house, et cetera. I think, like you said, I think some of the concerns are more in residential yards. This area is back on the railroad. The railroad sits up high. There's very little risk from this being steeper, and 3-to-1 slope is a standard slope that's used in the industry. And we've provided the necessary E&S calculations in our reports that it's stable at 3-to-1 and will be planted appropriately to remain stable. So we believe it's appropriate, and we've limited it to just that area to the south of the loading court.
And will there be a retaining wall at the back of the loading court?
Now,
So where's the grade come? Is it curb line? And then it falls off to the railroad tracks?
correct. So there's a retaining wall. As part of the zoning, we're required, there's a wetland pocket here. So there is a retaining wall along the wetland pocket to preserve the wetland pocket. But then from the back of the trailer stall, you have a curb line and then a small shelf for the light poles, et cetera. And then it basically just slopes down the railroad, 3-to-1 slope.
So
And the TOA slope is basically at, just shy of the property line of the railroad.
Is that bottom section sufficiently afforested that it won't be maintained with mowing and whatnot?
This whole bottom half is existing, well, there's existing woods along the railroad, and then as you can see, we're replanting that slope after we grade
Is it planned to be lawn as well, or is it just gonna be trees in there?
I mean, I think it has to start with some lawn while the features grow, but I think, I mean, I don't know if that area, if you let that go now, would that be acceptable to still let that area become part of the woodland?
So we could mark an area on the plan, and we see some other municipalities will note it not to natural condition to be maintained or.
Yeah, you
once
could
it's-
plan it
once
with a meadow
established.
mix too, and
Yeah, well, we'll actually get into that
With the lawn.
topic. A
But-
little bit later, we're gonna talk about the stormwater impacts of the future development phase and
but
we are looking at doing a meadow mix there as well and doing a no mower, 2 time a year mowing meadow mix to leave it, go back to a natural state. So
Did-
that is something that we can do as part of our maintenance plan.
just to clarify, because there's really 2 different locations that have this 3-to-1, 4-to-1 slope issue. One of them that we often deal with is in basins.
Right.
And that's more of a safety concern and whether or not we fence it and whatnot. The other more general one, the ordinance does allow for a 3-to-1 slope where the stability is certified. What we've asked in the past, even though you have it's in your erosion control plan and whatnot, is that you just do a letter indicating that based on XYZ design, the 3-to-1 slope will be stable.
So
Did we skip over removal of topsoil?
that's where we're going. That's,
Oh, okay.
but section 365-43I, topsoil removal. Alex, what are we doing specifically that requires this waiver?
It comes down, we have this waiver in multiple municipalities when we take old farm fields. Obviously, this was previously a farm field. It's got a very thick existing topsoil surface on it with the amount of green space that's left. You're limited really on how much topsoil you can put back with the need for structural fill underneath the building and underneath the parking lot. We just expect that due to the limited landscape areas that remain, the amount of topsoil that comes off of a farm field, we do not expect to be able to place back on the green space that's left after development. So we're looking for a waiver to be able to export as needed with what we can't install within the landscape areas of the site.
Have you had discussion with our manager about that?
Not to date.
They probably want to keep it in the township if you want to remove it from that site.
Yeah, I mean, if, we don't know if the township has a need or if there's a stockpile, you're not intending to use it anywhere else, correct? Yeah. Yeah.
You can't take it there unless you have a permit. That gets us in
No,
all kinds of
but-
trouble.
Yeah,
We have come to agreements on other sites, but it's something that you'll need to include in our discussions.
we need to
with-
iron
with
out.
staff.
Yeah.
Where it's going is-
Right. We always recommend, if at all possible, if it makes sense, to do some landscape berms on the property. You could lose some of it there. Oftentimes the township does take some of it for their own projects. And there's other arrangements made.
Yeah, I think we'll get into some discussions, I think maybe on landscaping, but, with the grading, due to the elevation of the site and the slopes required, we looked at some additional berming, I think, from a screening standpoint and a loss of topsoil standpoint. And it's something we can consider, but if we were to try and get enough flat area to berm up more topsoil, we would need to expand the areas that are 3-to-1 slopes. Like currently, this is a 4-to-1 slope, but it's graded from the road all the way up to the parking lot. And it basically, there's no flat area left to stockpile any more material. If we wanted to look at putting a small topsoil berm here, we could maybe look at it, but we'd have to go 3-to-1 up the road to get up steeper and to create a flat spot. So if you guys would prefer, a little bit more berming and some topsoil left there, that would be fine, but then we would have to expand the areas that are 3-to-1.
Understood.
What they don't like to see is, setting up a screener there and starting, selling retail
Yeah.
green topsoil off the property.
It's not your intent. You're not in the tops. You're in the food business, not the topsoil business.
Shakes his head no. Now his gears are spinning.
But so why don't we talk with Greg and see if there's known needs that align with the timing? And then that may be a higher value use for the topsoil than creating more 4-to-1 slopes.
Right.
Well, actually, now that we say it, we may need some over here. We're working out a deal with the water line contractor to
Right.
build the next field.
You gotta cover all the crud that they're gonna put back there.
No, there's some topsoil over there, but there may be an advantage to
Exactly.
have a little more to top dress it.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
we can cooperate and figure out where it's got to go. Next waiver, item 8I from Saldo Section 36848 F2C. We're requesting a maximum driveway width of 35 feet at the street and 54 feet at the curb line. And Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, that's to allow an increased radius on the curb for tractor trailers to maneuver in and out.
I just corrected 35 and 54 are the code standards. We
I'm
exceed
sorry.
those numbers. So we're asking to be able to exceed that. The width of the driveway is slightly different, it's 35 to 36. But it's the entrance for the trucks making a left turn in and the right turn out. This radius has to be larger to accommodate that truck movement. So obviously it opens up the throat and the width of the opening along the interface with.
And it was 3656.
The code standard is 34 width of the driveway, a 54-foot opening at the street. We're proposing a 36-foot wide driveway, but the distance from curb to curb at the opening is 100 feet.
again, similar issue we've had at the other commercial sites. There's a generic number in the ordinance to encourage people not to pave their entire front of their property. But they have shown their turning radius and what they need to get in and out of the site, and they're not going any bigger than what they need.
Yeah, I mean, we did that for
Everybody.
on the other meeting house project.
And Quarry Road too, I think.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, on the one side.
And the last waiver is 8J from Stormwater Management Section 352-18C regarding the type of storm pipe. Alex, do you mind walking through that? What we're asking for versus what's required?
Yeah, the code requires RCP storm pipe to use. We are using RCP pipe anywhere where we're in a public right of way. Inside the site for the private drainage system is part and parcel of the applicant's holdings outside public right of way. We are asking to be in those privately owned locations.
Common request.
Yeah, that's been permitted before for private systems.
Any issues with any of things? I did want to go back to the sidewalks. We had discussion way back when this project was still fledgling, with Wawa coming in to improve Meeting House from Wawa all the way to your site and install sidewalks to encourage, maybe your employees that are going to be going to Wawa they get lunch or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, break. Instead of driving, they'd be able to walk. We originally were asking Wawa to do it, and they came up with a plan that didn't really work very well. So we had discussion about improvement, road widening and improvements on Meeting House for this project. And I think there's a note somewhere that tit for tat on the type of thing.
Were they able to get all the way down to Old State? Because I think there's a couple of pinch points, I thought, on Meeting House.
That's one reason why the walkway didn't work.
Yeah.
But
And I'm just curious. 'Cause we looked at what's towards State Road from Old State on our site, and there's some stuff there.
right. We-
The impediments that Wawa
Kind of
faced,
back end.
we face the same impediments.
Right.
as well.
I've had some initial discussions with the property owner. There might be something that could get worked out in time. I don't want to commit to that, but I think that's still going to be a discussion regarding using the fee in lieu generated to do offsite road improvements to make that connection. You're going to have the truck traffic on, it's got to get from that intersection, from your frontage out to the traffic signal. And we did a similar thing on Varus on the other side of
Mhm.
the Old State Road. Varus is going to improve just the width. They're not doing sidewalks and curbs and things, but they're improving the width of the road from their warehouse up to the intersection. But yes, we have the existing buildings that we would need to cooperative agreement to make that work. The sidewalk, that gets tougher.
Right.
Just as far as room.
Yeah. And to be so I think, Zach, we're proposing a fee in lieu. And unless township rejects, if township says, no, we don't want the fee in lieu, put sidewalk in. But if we propose the fee in lieu, the township could take that and use that from Old State or wherever. But the idea would be from Old State Road down to Wawa.
That's the area of interest, yes.
Okay. Makes sense.
We have a sidewalk from Old State to Wawa, so it's not on the southern end of my property. It's going past the neighbor's house there. right?
Yep. But instead of you having to install the sidewalk on your property.
Okay.
So instead, it's the fee in lieu, once you pay the fee in lieu to the township, it's their discretion how to allocate that. But the township's interest is primarily getting from Old State Road to Wawa.
Right. Whether it's sidewalk, road widening, or both,
Something.
that's the interest, yes.
I suspect.
Quite frankly, they'd look for you to do it, not the township to do it. But it's just easier
See what,
bidding, contracting wise.
Okay.
If it could be arranged. Then you wouldn't be paying the,
yeah, I mean, it's
fee in
it's the threshold of what the fee in lieu is and what
Right.
that would get. So we have to sit with you and Greg.
right, if some
And,
equivalent project could be worked out.
All right, so any other comments or questions on the waiver request?
Not really related, not directly related to this, but Wawa initially had the path right behind it that we didn't go with, but we also there was nothing on Meeting House that was agreed upon. Is that correct?
Correct.
I don't have any other questions for this.
I guess my only other thought was it seems like there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be worked out with regard to the waivers. Is it just whether it's fee in lieu of or
Well, I think we need to have that larger discussion with staff as far as whether it's waivers, whether we could negotiate a alternate project or alternate improvements.
I'm thinking maybe it's appropriate to table waivers for the moment.
Probably, but we can give you the sense that most likely recommend if you get some things ironed out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the sense I have.
How does number 9 tie in all of that with regard to the participation of, your contribution to the signal improvements and what have you that we've made other applicants participate in? Does that all tie back into this with the?
Now, an extra ask.
Is that?
That's an extra ask for the increased traffic at the intersection. I mean, that's not, that comment was intended that don't put in sidewalk, give money towards the intersection. That was, you should provide a contribution towards that traffic signal because of the increased truck traffic through the intersection. That's
Right.
what that comment was intended to be.
So in our traffic study, looked at the intersection, looked at the warrants, looked what was there. Our use, our building doesn't do anything to degrade the level of service or cause any increase in the warrants to the traffic light. So I don't know that we're looking at making a contribution. If there's something striping or something that was required at the intersection, that's a conversation we could have, but I don't know that based on what impacts there are to the intersection that, we'd be doing that, but we expect to discuss that further, if there's any additional feedback.
Go ahead. But you state name and address, please.
You don't vote on the waivers without the hearing comes to you.
No, like I said, before we do anything, before we make any motions, we'll open up the public comment. And I don't think we're going to be voting on these this evening anyway. You get the sense that we're probably going to approve them if they get things ironed out.
Well, yeah,
Not approve them, recommend them.
I didn't know how it all worked. I didn't want to not be able to talk as neighbors without, before somebody would just say a freeholder waiver.
Right.
Or comments on some of it.
Yep. Yeah, I'll open the floor to public comment before we make any recommendations.
This is. I'm trying to say, it's a complicated plan that this is really the first public review of. And I think in accordance with how you handled past ones, I think it would be beneficial to at least hit through all of the items, not just, we did the waivers, that's fine, but not just skip through and say we comply with everything, just so everybody understands what we're asking for, what they're complying with. And it might help the public on some of the items. And I think there's one or two items that I wanted to, I
You
think
want to go back,
warrant additional discussion anyway.
Yeah, we have some, we have some simple drafting items that will comply with, but I do have a note of some more of the topics that keep a little bit tough.
Right. I'm only talking yeah, I'm talking the main letter, not any of the.
Yeah.
That's,
Sure. Do you want to pick up with number 10?
you want to go back to anything?
well, let me just see if there was anything in the first ones. So just for my clarification, we're doing the lot line adjustment to consolidate the properties and then the land development on this. Typically what we see is a separate recorded sheet for the lot line adjustment.
Yeah, we put it in the separate.
All right.
We wanted two separate applications where the consolidation is recorded first. Standalone is a recorded.
Right.
document.
It doesn't need to be a new application, but a standalone plan with all the
Okay.
signatures on it.
Separately.
Yeah, we'll record that,
So
then
the
we'll record the,
7 or 9 page record. It'll be sheet 2 or
Yeah, we'll just pull the lot consolidation out as a separate section
okay.
and add all the necessary certification.
Which is essentially like triple net. And now there was a minor subdivision, but it was the same idea. Recorded that plan.
Right.
It was part of the package, recorded the plan and then recorded the land development. Because the ownership is the ownership still two different names?
no, it's all owned. Benai LP closed on the property. Gosh, Zach, how many months ago? Both, yeah.
Okay, so you do own both of the
Yeah,
properties now.
both.
All right, so that's a little less complicated. In cases where I thought there was still the two owners. And
Yeah.
then you can't record.
We,
They would have to sign your land
Right,
development
one-
plan. That gets messy.
Benaya LP from the
Yeah.
entirety. It was
All right.
Sevco above, and I forget who owned the railroad parcel.
All right, we'll work that out.
Usually, that's right.
Just for the planning commission's benefit, to my understanding, the archaeological information was provided to the township and the historical society, so they have that.
And they got to go through the home, correct? Yep.
Great. Like the number of parking spaces. I guess there was the question, I think you have more than enough parking spaces, but there's we always usually at least try to look at, is there going to be a parking issue at shift change? But I think what you're saying is there's 77
I think in this
vehicle
case,
parking spaces and your largest shift is 40.
You guys
employees.
require the per 5,000 square foot of building, also above and beyond
Right.
employee, and that creates enough overlap for any concerns.
And-
I mean, generally, the parking lot meets the tenant's needs for their employee count and their shift change. So we have the employee parking lot in the northwest, which, as we noted, the largest shift is 40 employees. There's almost 80 parking stalls in that spot. And then the other employees are mostly truck drivers. There's obviously the truck trailer parking, the loading dock, and then on the rear of the site in the southeast corner is also van parking, which would be the any off-site van delivery drivers. That's quote unquote employee vehicle parking for the vans that use.
Those vans are your delivery trucks. That's where you're sending
So
product out.
that's,
Are you incorporating Durstein Foods with this? And are you still going to operate your current facility?
As of now, that's the plan.
Right.
Change, Christian, but that's
I get it.
kind of undecided. My plan would be.
So, I mean, that would warrant your delivery trucks. That's where I was a little confused.
And what,
Like a business that I thought we were talking
and
about.
is your shift change a hard shift change, or do you have people that kind of roll staggered? So it's not the old factory days, 7 to 3, yeah, it's a little softer.
While we're going back, I'm just, item number 5. We're talking about, number of trucks coming in, storing those trucks, with the reefers running. So that the reefers are gonna generate noise. The truck motors will be shut off, but the reefer motors will be, the compressors will be,
yeah,
running.
This spells out a little bit in the narrative. So it is a 24-hour facility, but I believe you said 90% of the trucks are between 7 and 3.
Right.
There is, the opportunity for a truck to come anytime during the 24 hours, but obviously the bulk is during the 7 to 3. The truck court on the south side is where the storage is. If they're waiting for a loading dock to be open, they would be, shut down. As Zach noted, they shut off the diesel while that's running, but the reefers are running. But with the orientation of the stalls, the reefers are in the front of the truck over the cab. And the loading dock, it does have to back in, so that noise would be directed internal to the site towards the building and not out towards any of the surrounding property owners. So I believe that helps with the noise abatement as well.
So my next question would be, how are you going to deal with backups? I mean,
So
if we-
operationally, what we did is if you see this white board area,
Mhm.
if there's a loading dock waiting and they're waiting for a truck assignment, the vehicles would pull in. There's enough room for 2 trucks to queue here.
Right.
For them to go into the building, get their ticket, get their dock assignment, come back out, get back in their truck, back into a loading stall or back into a trailer parking stall. And then, so this is basically, for lack of a better term, a staging area. That's right. Right. Any ability for them to have somewhere to park their truck while they run in.
Right.
Their dock assignment, et cetera.
I mean, I've experienced one of the cold storage places up, off a pumping station. And, tractor trailers parked on the street waiting to get in. And it's certainly a situation I wouldn't want to see there. I actually saw a sign the other day at another facility on, was that California Road? That said, if you can't get in, go to the closest truck stop.
Well,
It didn't seem like a good solution.
No, and your business is much different, right? You're not a wholesaler. You're direct to restaurant or other vendors, correct?
Our business.
Yeah.
Business trucks that will be.
Yeah, but not near to the U.S. cold storage scale. Yeah, because you don't have the height, You don't have near the number of loading docks, but the concern, not dismissing the concern.
Right.
But I think it's a matter of scale, that it's not, you're not putting a sign up that's going to say, go to Wawa.
Can't park there.
Yeah.
They don't
made
want you.
sure of
They
that.
made sure of that, yeah.
I'm still a little confused. The truck spaces across the truck court from the loading docks, are those intended for long-term storage of trailers or just the intermittent storage when there's
No,
not enough room?
Most of our business is around the port. We containers have to go back within, I think, 36 hours. We can be our kids. So they would not be there long term. And frozen meat, when it comes in, the reapers don't run because it's so cold. It's stacked on the floor and there's no air circulation. All tight. Swing doors.
So somebody would deliver that trailer, drop it at your facility, the truck pulls away, and it's on you to get that trailer back to the port within a certain amount of time.
We find every day.
And you don't want to pay big fees or big fines. Yeah.
Are you gonna have a jockey tractor there to move the container? We have a jockey truck there to move the containers around?
So that's just trailer storage. That's not with a tractor. That section,
To the south.
To the south.
Putting tractors there, just putting trailers.
just dropping trailers there.
But you need some tractors to return the containers, right?
My plan is to come back the next day, bring the container, take it back.
One for one, ideally.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the depth of those stalls is just for the trip.
Right.
So when you were talking about sound being redirected into the property from the reefer units,
If they even run.
that'd just be on the trailer sitting there waiting.
Is there a fence to the,
It might not even need to run if it's cold enough there.
is there a fence to the south of the parking court there?
So that's a discussion item. At one point, we talked about a fence there. I think that's a topic that's open for discussion. The difficulty with fencing is it makes maintenance very difficult if you block off that whole area. Again, it's somewhat an owner decision. We had some concerns about sealing off that whole area with a fence because then that area between that fence and that railroad basically becomes a no man's land that's difficult to mow and difficult to maintain. If we're talking about letting that just go back to natural, maybe the maintenance concern goes away, but when you have a solid fence there, that area basically becomes invisible and outside the operation of the property. So we typically have some concerns with long-term maintenance of that area. If you want it to be, maintained as a mode and a more, aesthetic landscape field. If we're looking at letting it restore and doing a meadow mix, it's not mode, and I'll defer to Zach is whether or not he'd be comfortable, putting up a slightly conservative.
The other thing you might want to take into consideration, say, we had the issue down at Barris where that lot is above grade, right? You're saying your 15-foot cut on the upper side and 15-foot fill roughly
Correct. Yeah,
on that lower
the loading
side.
dock is above the railroad.
So you're going to see those trucks sitting there from off in the distance. Those plantings ultimately will get high enough, but they're going to be planted down the slope.
Right.
What about the trees that are there now? They cover from the trucks.
I mean, we'd have to look. There
I
is
don't know.
some existing trees along the railroad.
It's a consideration. We had that consideration because we had some residential properties in that area. And in that case, we actually did.
Probably have to be 25, 30 feet high along the railroad to block it.
Right, but what they ultimately did was put a fence, like a 12-foot high fence right at the parking lot, which would be essentially the height of the containers. So
Right.
you wouldn't see them from across the street because they sat 20 feet higher than Meeting House Road, or not Meeting. It's just
You'd always put a gate in there to permit.
Pine
maintenance,
Road. Right, yeah, you would have to have a
Or
gate.
something.
What we had there, they actually drew a sketch that like a cross section through there that you could then see what
Right.
the impact was, maybe that would be beneficial here.
That's
I know
what the
Mr. Ballmer
subscriber
lives
concerns.
over, has all of his properties over that way, and that might be a concern for his also.
As far as, tree height needed to block.
Yeah,
Basically a sightline view from downstream properties up.
right. Would all the plantings be below where those trucks are, or would the plantings actually create a buffer?
I know we did a building section. I don't believe.
I don't think I had landscaping.
Landscaping.
It didn't have landscaping on it.
Because that retaining wall that's around the wetlands, that's actually, the retaining wall is high on the parking lot side and drops to the wetlands, right? Yeah, it's not a raised wall. That would be higher than the parking lot.
So, and we're talking about this area.
Things are on the hill, yeah?
Correct.
So those trees will be, some of the trees are pretty close to the same grade, and then as it goes down, of course, the trees will go down with the grade.
Right.
So there's quite a bit of trees there already, I was just walking that this week, quite a bit of trees on the railroad already.
A good portion of them are gonna get knocked out to grade the slope to get the parking lot built. It's a
Yeah,
catch.
there's two parcels. There's the original, that triangle, the lot consolidation parcel. That has some trees on it that will come down and be replanted, but then there's the extra width within the railroad right away where some of the trees won't be preserved. So it's probably 50-50.
What's the height difference between the railroad bed and the parking lot?
I believe it's 8 feet.
Oh, that's it.
It goes down and back up
After the
again.
railroad,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there's a channel at the railroad, right? So our site drops, I believe it's an 8-foot slope. And then the railroad's like 2 or 3 feet above that.
What's on the other side of the railroad?
fields, orange fields.
It changes along there because by the 309, it's fairly level into the field, and then to get into there, then you got a big drop.
Towards bottom meeting
Yeah,
house.
I believe this is the highest point. This wetland, we believe, is caused by, there was an old railroad culvert underneath here. That we tried desperately to find, what we could find on the low end, but not on the high end. Which creates this wetland. So I think this is the highest point where, the railroad's filled up above it. And as you noted, as it goes and crosses under 309, it starts to level out.
There's another road tree down at the creek, right? Can't see it from drawing.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's what might be the good idea to have that cross section. You could show what,
We show what the height of the plantings, existing and proposed plantings are and what that looks like versus a tractor trailer
What the sight
and then the
line-
building. Because I think.
Yeah, that would help.
That could be we could update the existing cross section.
Yeah.
I believe that's the view in, right? From.
Well, the building section we used for zoning was north-south. That would be from the railroad. We want a view from Meeting House into the site house.
North-south through the center of the building.
Correct. The zoning hearing exhibit we used was north-south because that was a concern about how the cut on this side with the wall, how that lessens the impact of the height of the building, because this is about a 15-foot wall and the building sits below it. So obviously from these neighbors, you see 15 feet less of the building than you do here. As we noted, Meeting House is generally level, and then as you fall off, this becomes, 8 or 10 feet above the roadway. From Meeting House, as we talked about, this parking lot actually sits below Meeting House. Meeting House climbs, so there's actually a wall here. So this parking lot is actually low. So you would actually, from Meeting House, you'd likely be looking over the cars at the building, and you wouldn't even see any headlights or cars there. And then this is filled up, but most of the trucks, we tried to orient it so there's limited headlight glare coming across, or, any trucks, you come in the site and then you're driving away from Meeting House as you climb up. So we can look at some various view sheds.
is that, not to interrupt you, is that the church driveway right across from the entrance? The entrance is closer to the church than
Yeah, this is the church.
in the intersection. For
Ridge
perspective.
Valley, yeah.
Well, if we want to keep moving. 6 was just all the zoning That was just an item.
Yep.
7 was a reference to the approvals they got for the, for the wetlands and the protection that they have there. We talked about 8 already, that's all the waivers. 9 is the traffic study and the potential contribution for the signal. We talked about that. 10 is, that's where I had the conversation in my letter of alternate improvements on Meeting House Road. And there's actually potentially one more waiver request at 36531M that you would have to add to your list.
No, we're proposing that additional overlay. I think those improvements are part of our solving global discussion.
You are on Meeting House, you're not on Old State.
We're planning not to do anything else.
Right, so you would need the waiver of that section for Old State, just like the curb and sidewalk. And
My understanding was it was only if you were disturbing it for construction, you had to repair it and do a cohesive overlay. So this is even if you're not widening it, you want a full overlay of any kind. Without how you guys
Yeah.
view that section. I misunderstood. I only thought it was to avoid isolated trenching and that saw cuts.
well, that too, but there are some roads where we just overlay them and don't widen them, but in any event. I'll say utilities. I guess we don't have the sewage planning module. Where is sewer coming from?
The sewer plant module is currently under review at the company.
Right, but physically, is
There's
it
a
sewer in
main
front of the
meeting
site?
house on the west side of the roadway.
Okay,
So we're basically connecting south of the driveway. We're coming out. The office of the building is in this lower corner. So this is the office, this is the freezer box, and this is the loading dock. The office is in the lower corner, so the sewer basically comes out the southern corner and connects into the sewer main and meeting house right around the church driveway. And there's an existing copper main.
right, and the water main was right in front of the property too.
Well, the water main stops at Old State and Meeting House.
And you're gonna
And
extend
we're
it.
extending it. There's currently, they stopped it at the Old State intersection. And there's a stub under the railroad that was already installed. And we're basically connecting those two gaps.
So it'll be looped.
Not looped, it's still that end, but
Okay.
it's gaining frontage on this portion of Meeting House currently does not have a water main. We're basically building that missing link. And then we just got a comment. They wanted us then to add another course of pipe on the south side of the railroad and put a hydrant on the south side of the railroad. So we're doing that. So it'll still dead end, but now it'll dead end one course of pipe below the railroad versus dead ending at Old State. And then we'll obviously circle that new section. Once again, right around the church driveway. All the utilities come in right about it.
Okay, 11 was right-of-way dedications. That's, will comply, correct? 12, I think, in here is some of those discussions we had about the site distance and just what we were talking about, that you're below grade at the Old State Road level, but above grade at the lower end of the site. I specifically tried to call all that out because we had all those discussions with Veris multiple times over retaining walls and how things would be screened. Right, you did redo your cut and fill calculations and they're fairly,
We're working
Fairly
with the
balanced.
General contractor,
Yeah.
we're making some modifications to the site. Intent for the site to balance.
Yeah. And then, as we said before, there will be excess topsoil. Stormwater, I don't think we have to talk about. We'll work that out engineering wise and with your NPDS permit. Unless there was any of the stormwater questions that you had, Alex?
The only thing to clarify, you note that there's a potential, we had talked about a potential deferral for 13C for the undeveloped H2 portion of the site, but we intend to comply.
Okay,
We're basically gonna revert that back to a meadow mix and the
and that'll,
meadow addresses.
Make that
one
difference.
and another.
okay, that's good.
14.
We actually, I think we covered the bulk of
Yeah.
that some of our earlier.
All the landscaping is mostly the waiver discussion.
Any thoughts about getting a landscape architect involved, like county asked for? Or
Some
something?
plan was prepared by landscape architect. I think they're just asking for a seal.
Okay.
The plan was.
15, you did the environmental studies, we talked about that. Lighting. Some of our other warehouses, they agreed to a light dimming system. I don't know if that would or would not work with your 24-hour operation. If you get that much reduced activity at night.
No issue, but the concern is if there's a truck that's there after hours, they need on the. Things we talked about, if there's operationally, I don't know that there's areas we go to
Well, it's,
an area where we could turn off lights or something.
I could give you the system that they were using, because the system did work on basically motion sensor, and the lights did come back if trucks came on the property. It was sort of when there was no activity on the lot. But those facilities also weren't geared towards a 24-hour operation.
And yeah, I think the concern is if there's no, if somebody drives in parks, there's no motion, that you don't necessarily want to get dark on that. There's no motion. Right, so there's operational concerns with safety of a 24-hour facility, but.
But they're down shielded and they're.
Yeah, it's all, they're full cutoff and all those things. I think it's just a question of whether or not we can drop light levels.
Zach, do you have employees that'll be using the employee parking lot 24/7?
Yes.
Okay, then we'd probably know, I don't know if you have a note on the plan, but if you don't, add a note that you'll shield the lights if we find that they cause glare on any adjoining property.
Yeah, the note is that, because I believe that last sentence of 16, it said notes have been added indicating. that
Okay, good.
shield
Okay.
will be installed.
Yep. I can't even remember what I wrote.
Sorry.
Recreation land, assume you're gonna ask to do a fee,
I don't think we're putting in
putting a baseball field in.
I don't think so.
On the roof.
Ultimately, Telford Borough will have to sign off on water and sewer.
Plans are kind of under it.
Fire company, I think we resent it to them because they didn't have the new layout. So if we get a comment from the fire company, we will,
And we
or the
did
fire marshal.
add a Knox box location where
Good.
we recommend it based on our architecture, so. that should be that. No problem on this stuff.
Talked about planning modules, they have to come through.
Yeah, we hope that the Telford Borough Authority will be approving it shortly, and then we'll send it to the township process.
Okay. It's all gravity sewer, right? You're not pumping anything.
Correct.
So that'll be an easy one. NPDS permit, you have to get monumentation, you have to do agreements, you have to do. So the rest is paperwork. I don't think we have to go through the detail.
So it sounds like we have to have a staff meeting.
Greg yelled at me because I didn't give him dates. I will give him dates.
All right.
All right, so.
So we'll have a staff meeting and we'll come back to you, assuming we can nail down the issues of the topsoil fee in lieu, if there's multiple fees in lieu, and the alternative proposals.
Before you shut down, I want to open the floor to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any comment or question on this project?
Yeah, if you,
Dan, if you don't, if whoever wants to speak, please come up to the microphone so we can record you. State your name and address.
Dan Ballmer, Ballmer Farms right across the tracks there, neighbors. Just a number of things. It would have been nice to just talk through them as we went along, because I kind of feel like I'm going to be bringing stuff up again, but I understand completely. So I think on the landscape plan, somewhere I saw there were 9 Norway spruces, but that can't be right with all the trees you're talking about, right? Because was was one of these squares up here in the end, or?
Yeah, there's a landscape plan. I mean, there's a mix between Norway spruce, Serbian spruce, and one other spruce.
Oh, yeah, 35 Norway.
I think there's 35 spruce.
Yeah.
There's a mix of the different. So, like I said, if we wanted to discuss changing, you know, a Serbian spruce to a Norway spruce or a white pine to something else, we're open to discussions. As long as we stay in line with, you know, not creating monoculture and meeting, I believe, 50% of any.
Yeah, and I don't know all those details about those, so I'm just going on my experience and what we have used that works really good at our bulk plant. I think some of the people here on Planning Commission was down to visit that, and we use just plant Norways on a 25-foot center and alternating rows, and they really overlap in a good amount of time, or a decent amount of time to look half decent. But I like the idea of berms too, but I understand the slopes maybe are an issue, but I was thinking ahead of time with all the good topsoil up there. I know it's good topsoil because we had some good crops up there at one time. So it'd be nice to, we've always built berms to plant our Norways on. They did better, and they started out just a little bit higher too. So just a comment about that. I'd appreciate that. But I can't see, of course, with it's flat, so I understand what they're talking about there. Those green spots really look great there, but I don't know exactly. It's hard sort of to read all the variety of trees. Like, did they say that you're going to put the ones along the street? Are they dogwoods or something like that? Did I see?
The mix of a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
And a dogwood would fall under the ornamental criteria.
Right.
That's treated as a small ornamental tree.
Yeah.
Then there's, you know, larger shade trees, and then there's evergreen trees. So there's a lot of variety to one trying to create a diverse landscape and avoid that monoculture.
I probably
Mix of many.
I don't understand all the ordinances, so I like to see things that screen it and fill in, as opposed to a dogwood tree in my book hasn't ever done real well in my yard, and it just kind of thins out, and you don't really hit block very much at all anyway. I realize that the power lines are along the road, so you have to keep them back if you're going to plant trees.
Yeah, I think there's some other options to dogwoods in the small tree category.
And
And
once again, the code wants just all upright deciduous trees. I mean,
Right.
that's one of our waivers is, what's the right mix of evergreen versus ornamental versus deciduous?
Mhm.
So if you guys want less ornamental or evergreen, you know, that's the kind of guidance we're looking.
Yeah, I think probably Zach would agree. He wants to plant something that's going to live too and look decent. So,
I told that all yours.
well, probably all my Norways will die tomorrow, maybe. But I know they do just much better than white pines and such. So I'm just keep that in mind. I really appreciate it. Also heard of a contractor recently who offered to plant trees across the road, like my neighbors here, Alvin and Dawn, and the church. I had stopped in to see the church today. They're not here tonight, but they were wondering about ways to just spruce things up. That's kind of a dumb thing to say, but to guard against that. Not that we don't like seeing our neighbors, but I think we all realize what we're trying to block and to see. Let's see, because I just wanted to remind us of our neighbors across the street. See how I plant mine, and they're welcome to come down and see how we do ours, if that would work. I think it looks good. Couple other questions. Like the Norways, what do they plant? Like what size do they plant? Did I see 8 feet in there?
I don't have a link. I believe they do it.
Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, I'm going to jump around because I was making notes as we went, but like trucks waiting, that's a really good thing, Chris.
What's that again?
Trucks waiting out, having to wait on the road occasionally. I mean, that would be a really bad spot to wait out on the road. Hopefully they don't. You don't have too many sitting on State Road once in a while. I see sitting there, but there's just a couple, I guess.
Right now, we have a parking lot on both the tractor trailers.
Yeah.
That is an issue right
Yeah.
now today, but this lot has
Should.
capacity, holds on this around.
I was wondering, with only doing part of the project and leaving the other not done, will that just stay at grade, then it won't be developed flat? Or I'm just curious, does that get,
This plan is only approving the building that's shown on this sketch. The green space to the east is a potential area that's slated for, or contemplated for future improvement, but we don't know what that building would look like at this time.
But you're
There is
grading it
existing,
off now. To
There's
some,
existing rock that needs to be dealt with now. So that area is gonna be graded because once the building's up, can't deal with the rock once the building's there. So the site will be both graded as part of this application. But then from a cut fill perspective, we need some of that dirt if and when phase two gets built. So we're basically gonna both grade it, but then basically firm it back up and come close to restoring the existing grade today. We basically have to deal with the rock and then
Mhm.
put everything right back where it was. And then that area to deal with the stormwater impacts. It's not shown on this plan, but the new plan to deal with the stormwater impacts for that separate drainage shed is we're gonna do a meadow mix on that area, restore it to meadow. We have to keep about a 50-foot band of grass around the building because of it being a food facility. There are some concerns about pests and rodents, et cetera. So we can't put meadow all the way up to the building, but we need a certain distance for food safety. But then everything east of that, we're gonna naturalize, restore back to a meadow and do a, you know, whatever, a 1 or 2 year mound into a naturalized condition. But it will be graded, but then somewhat restored to what you see today. It'll sit a little bit higher than the building. The grade in that area is a little higher.
On a grading plan, all the wood are now running down towards the railroad tracks. And is there going to be swales then coming all the way out towards wherever that pipe goes out underneath the road?
We have drains all the way along the low point of the site, pretty much right around where the wetland is. From an MPDS permit standpoint, they require you to maintain the water flow to that wetland. So the site basically is captured in a series of inlets in the parking lot. Then there's that retaining wall that wraps along the wetlands. The pipes will basically daylight through that retaining wall, push the water back through the wetlands to keep the wetland quote unquote alive, for lack of a better term. But then since the pipe is either clogged or buried or missing underneath the railroad, then we have a series of inlets at the low end of the wetlands to pick it up. And then we are extending a pipe all the way down south of the railroad, all the way down to the existing stream. And there's an existing culvert through the low end of your farm field. And we'll discharge our water directly into the stream that way.
So all the,
Part and parcel of the wetland permit. It's under review at.
so all the wood are coming down this slope, these slopes here, it's all gonna run this way, right?
Well, there's a saddle on the site, a high point's right about the middle.
Mhm.
So the right side of the site, basically the green outside of the building, drains to the east and runs along a channel on the north side of the railroad.
Okay.
And goes along the railroad and then it goes into the creek down further to the east. But the building and the parking lot all gets picked up in inlets, all comes down to the lower left corner and then runs all the way down Meeting House Road and is piped directly to the stream. So the water that used to come through the pipe underneath the railroad and onto your farm field is no longer going to go through that pipe. It's now going to get piped
Mhm.
around your farm field and into that stream.
Will you be able to cap or plug that? I mean, I haven't looked at that lately, but I know it's plugged, there's not much running, but there is some comes through there. I just wondered if we could stop any, any water coming through that pipe.
Yeah, that pipe sits on SEPTA property, so we're working through those details with SEPTA on what the future of that pipe is gonna be. The difficulty is, we don't know that we can remove it because it's underneath the
Right.
rail line. We also don't know. I mean, I was out in the field, we tried to trace it up from the low end. It feels like it's clogged,
Mhm.
10 feet up, we couldn't even get a push rod through there. We couldn't figure out any history of that pipe or a location of that pipe. So we're trying to work through those details. But that's, I think, gonna fall under, SEPTA's pipe and SEPTA right away. So we have to take the lead from them as to how they want it dealt with, because we don't want to undermine or do anything that would affect the rate.
Right.
And just to interrupt on the stormwater question, because we've kind of talked around it, there is a large underground stormwater basin in the truck parking
Oh, yeah.
area. So it's not just directly from the building and the parking lots to the wetland area. It's building and parking lots through the underground storage basin, essentially, then into the wetlands.
Detention, infiltration, both.
I don't think you had no infiltration, right, on this? They're down in the rock.
That's what I thought.
Okay, yeah, just hopefully more water will be able to come through that pipe. It's been clogged, and pretty clogged for a long while. And there's,
We're trying to put inlets along that whole, I mean, currently the whole cornfield drains to the railroad, and then in the water you're seeing. I mean, we have a wetland pocket, obviously, we think water's kind of just ponding in, sitting up against the railroad. We think the water that you're seeing is just leaking through the ballast in the railroad and kind of leaching through and coming into the pipe or along the pipe and down into your pond field. The one benefit is now, with that site being developed and curved, all that water that used to come and hit the railroad embankment now goes into pipes, into the stormwater system and gets piped around. So the only water that would flow even towards that railroad at all is that small grass slope from the railroad down. And then we added inlets along the base of that slope to pick up all that water and divert it around. But we don't think that water is even gonna sit against that railroad to leach through it. That's the approach.
I think my next question was pretty well answered, but I was wondering if you were going to be able to leave some of those larger trees right along the railroad, or how far down you were clearing with the incorporation of.
The railroad property is staying, but the triangle parcel that was previously owned by Hughes, we bought is basically location of the fill slope
Mhm.
to pad up the truck court. So those trees would be removed and then replanted with the proposed landscaping.
Mhm.
So we'll try and visualize that in these sections that we talked about on where we see some existing trees preserving versus what the slope will be and be planted.
It's a little bit difficult to see where that railroad boundary is when you walk out there. It's,
Yeah, it's not.
yeah.
I believe there's a controller cabinet. It's a pretty good location of the line. And have to find that controller cabinet and look kind of down the railroad.
Mhm. The other thing I was going to ask was just about the tree plantings right behind the storage trailer parking there. Are some of those trees not too far off the height of the blacktop there, or are they dropped down?
We basically come off the macadam and have a shelf around and then drop down. So the trees are right up against it. It'd be pretty close in elevation, and then as you get further away, obviously they're dropping. The concern will be if we have to look at those sections and see where they fall. But if you see right at the top, there's almost a linear run of plantings that's 5 feet off the edge of those trailer parking stalls.
Mhm.
We concentrate as many trees as we can in that area because that's the highest point of that fill slope to maximize the screening. And then obviously we just fill them down the slope so that there's some width to that buffer. But obviously as it slopes down, the trees start a little bit lower.
Okay. And I got some of my numbers here off of the original sheet that I had. So with the fencing, like, could you just quickly say where the fencing is designed to be now? Any fencing that is there? There is some chain link and some.
Only fencing we currently show on the plan is safety fencing for fall protection on the high side of the retaining walls. So that we typically spec chain link fencing because of the strength required, because of the height of the walls, and fall protection.
Mhm.
There's the retaining wall on the north and then the retaining wall along the wetlands. That's currently the limit of fencing. Then I think the other question is whether or not any screening fencing is needed, and that's I believe why they requested the sections to show what the trees will block versus sidewalks, et cetera.
Does the chain link has that plastic in it? Like you can't see through it, or it's just chain link?
Typically spec black coated chain link fencing without slots. The slots just break and go up on what works out.
And then is there a fence all along Old State on the top of that wall? That's chain link. Okay. And what type of fence is up there on the top of that wall?
Anything that's above or chain link.
Okay. And that would just be 8 feet or 6 feet or? Good.
Whatever the code is, unless you call protection.
So the fences that you have on the plan are not intended for screening. They're only for protection. That's the way it's currently shown up.
But they could have screening if you wanted them, right? Okay. Already talked about the dimming thing. I wondered about that. I heard you discuss that there. I thought that the other warehouse guys were all 24-hour, but they aren't then.
They're not guaranteed
Okay.
because they had no tenants.
Okay.
This is already a known
Mhm.
24 hour.
The other things I had was questions on the traffic. So I haven't been following it real well with the Wawa project. I think we all know that we need a light down there at some point. Some people would say maybe sooner than later.
Yesterday.
What's
Yesterday.
so I was just wondering how that was all going to come into play with Zach's project and Wawa and the people across the street. Like, I think we ought to have it yesterday. So is it going to be something that's going to happen? Like if this project goes through, is Wawa coming along after that? Maybe that's just a broad question. but-
Wawa is an approved plan, and I'm almost certain we'll go to construction before this project does. And they are obtaining the permit for the traffic signal and will install it. Some of the other warehouse projects are contributing essentially to Wawa or to the project to offset some of the expense, but the actual installation is in conjunction with the Wawa project.
And I've seen that they're putting poles, widening State Road too then, I take it. Because they have poles moved on the north side of State Road all the way in from Meeting House all the way towards Quarry. So
The poles that are moved out of Quarry Road are for intersection widening that's going in from that warehouse.
okay,
the Triple D
yeah.
warehouse. There will not be a traffic signal at Quarry.
Mhm.
There's just turn lanes and widen. But
Okay.
there will be some widening in front of the Wawa site because there's an entrance there and some turn lanes.
Okay. And with that light down there, if I could ask, is that going to widen the opening there to come out with a tractor trailer, I guess, coming?
Designed for tractor trailers to turn right to go to the bypass.
Yeah, okay,
There will be new inlets and new curbing there, but it
Mhm.
will be
okay.
widened from what's there now.
And then the other part was, I think, and my neighbors are concerned about it too, is just what's going to happen there at Old State and Meeting House with the stop sign, the hill, the blind spots, all that stuff. How does that get covered with what we're talking about here?
It's something our traffic consultant will have to look at with this project.
Okay. Yeah, because I think could be an accident waiting to happen, although it hasn't, I think, had it too bad. The worst was when a boat went over there and the boat came off, right? Dropped off, but it was, yeah. The other thing I was just wondering, and I want to just comment on was, I'm assuming that 99% of the tractor trailers will come off the 309, come down, turn left into the site, come out of the site, turn right, go back up the 309. I'm concerned if somebody comes in there and doesn't know what they're doing and they go left, they go down towards us. Now we take our trucks down there, but we know the road, and going out the other way, there's really not too many places to go. If they go out Reliance, they can turn on Reliance and head out towards Souderton. So there's one way out there, but with big trailers, not a very good side to our road or shoulder at all. I was wondering if you'd consider putting no left-hand turn out of that driveway or or only local traffic. I don't know, some way of keeping trucks from turning left. I know that they're going to want to go back out the way they came, I hope. But I'd hate to see them be able to turn left and end up someplace they don't want to be. Just a thought.
Zach is nodding his head that is local deliveries only.
Yeah.
No lefts other than local delivery.
I didn't know how the best.
Cars.
Oh, yeah.
Driver you have this day and age, the tractor trailer drivers are not good. Taking the left out of there, like you say, and heading back out Reliance Road or trying to.
If they try to go out to Old Bethlehem Pike and go out there and then try to turn left on that,
They're looking good.
yeah, that won't work so good. We do have trailers come over that use that for a shortcut, like to go to to Morrissey. So there's there's tractor trailers on there once in a while. Let's see. Now, I was just getting a little bit about the noise, Zach, and there's just like we know how many like decibels that all those noises, the noises are going to be like a compressor. Some people are worried about the compressors, or is there? I was wondering if there was is there a place we could hear what it's going to sound like, just to know? Like, I don't know, maybe your place is over there. I don't know, just like what that noise is. We get, like Bob's concerned about the noise because that's going to be like right straight out his window. I just wondered what that noise is and what you do to suppress that. I know you're probably concerned about yourself, but I just wondered, how do we know that?
Check my record, I think the last time when I asked me, I did research on it, and for the trucks, it was 48 decibels, which is less than house air conditioning. I think I looked it up for you. And the refrigeration units, they're half and half. Half are inside the building, half are outside the building. The ones that are outside the building are on the roof. So I don't, I'm sure how loud they are. I think probably it's Steve.
Okay, I don't know. I just wondered. I mean, that's how I know my grandsons were over the other night. There's five of them, and they were at 95 at the table. Yeah.
They were
yeah.
quiet.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, so a noise like that, we certainly hear Fresco, some of us, and that's out over the tracks there. I don't know what all they're running there, but
I think is it fair to, acknowledging your current facility is smaller than this one, but is your refrigeration setup going to be similar to what you have at your current facility?
No. Our facility right now, we have ammonia, there's 325 horsepower two compressors. New facility Freon, there's no central machine room. Like I mentioned, half the units inside the building, half the units outside the building, and the outside is on the roof. So my opinion is be less noise than you have today, State Road. Because there's no central room, because everything's on the roof, and the noise is going to travel straight up.
let's see.
Out the internet here without going up that.
What's your name and address?
Bob Blum, I live right across the street. Old State Road. On the way home today, I noticed a lot of the buildings had units on the roof, and all those buildings had soundproof fences around them. Is that something we could do on something like this to try to mitigate some of that noise
The fences.
on the rooftop? Yeah,
I understand, were they around the perimeter of the building, or were they around the unit?
they were around the
themselves?
units themselves.
Yeah, I can check it out. I think the units might have that already. Check it for you, sure. I would appreciate it.
I was wondering, with the stormwater and the pipe going down to the creek, is that one of the first things you do even before excavation for runoff and stormwater management? Or is that something that's just done? I just wondered how that, to get water.
DNS involved part of the phasing of the project is you have to install what's called a sediment trap or sediment base.
Mhm.
You know, the erosion while you're moving the dirt. So that basin requires that its outfall be in, you've got to, as part of your NPDS permit, your state stormwater permitting, that basin has to have its outfall. So that pipe would be installed first, that basin would be installed. Would concentrate that discharge where we talked about, and then you would be able to do all your earth moving. So to answer your question, yes, that pipe is one of the first to install because you need that pathway before you can open up the site.
Okay.
That's a portion of the NPDS permit.
I had one other thing here. 15F. Well, I was looking at this September 27th Land Corps thing here. And I'm not sure which was section. Yeah, it was like section 15 or number 15F. Soil borings completed on site were shallower than design. I was just curious what that was. I guess that might have been talking about the rock that was going to be found under the.
Yeah, is that the response letter that you had provided? That was this.
I don't think that's the way to.
No, I think it was a response letter, and it was probably a stormwater comment from a prior review. Talking about where you did your test digs and the infiltration test.
That might have been.
Because at that time you had a basin proposed over off to the bypass side of the base of the site, and it was the final grades were lower than the rock.
Okay.
Page 10 of 15,
What's that?
page 10 of 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the response letter.
That goes back to when it was a larger building and there was improvements. At that time, there was stormwater proposed for that. Quote unquote phase 2 addition, but that's in the.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Alvin Landis, 3065 Old State and 3055 Old State. So we'd have the corner and then the next house. And yeah, we do. I mean, as residents right there, we have our concerns. And I guess to be absolutely clear, I want Durstine to succeed. So we're not like making a fight, but what I do want to do is advocate for the residents. And that's an area that kind of, and I guess you guys probably know, but one of our immediate concerns is we didn't somehow or other, we didn't get the certified letter about the meeting, and we're like right there. And I'm not even sure that our neighbors going that way on Old State. I know Bob got the letter, the Blums, but I don't know.
Nobody on Old State got a letter.
And that set, it was just hard for me to take that in a good way. I kind of feel like that's an oversight that says to the neighbors, it sent a wrong message to me. I don't know, it bothers me that, that is supposed to be a legal thing that's supposed to be gone through. I mean, we did it when we tried to do something. It was real easy to do. And it was just hard for us not to read into it. There's some kind of intent that we didn't get the official notification of it. And so so disappointment sets a bad precedent, but we want to watch our attitude and we want to be for each other. But we do have concerns as residents, and we have tenants here, young families that live right here. And so for us, obviously it's the screening. Screening is a big buzzword for us. When Bob said about screening for the units, any kind of screening we can get against noise is what we would make a
we would make a loving plea for any kind of screenings we could get. If we could get a berm, I know that was already addressed, but any kind of berm or to set the screenings higher for, the rigs that will come out, their headlights they'll be coming up and they'll be trucking up and they'll be trying to get up that hill, and we'll have that noise it's a 24-hour place. And it's hard for me as a resident to imagine that well, it's kind of blowing my mind actually that there's not more talk about what are we going to do about this road, because even if it's 50 big rigs a day, but it's actually going to probably be more like 100 with a facility like that. I don't understand how that narrow road is going to not create an issue at some point. But I guess as a resident right there, that raises a question mark with all this professional planning. Is there nothing drawn up about the road? Is that just going to be left how it is, exactly like that? And if there is something going on, shouldn't we know about it if it's going to affect? Is it going to cut into our side of Meeting House? Or it's just hard for me to imagine that that's just going to be able to left plain. I guess it's fine if it is, if you guys determine.
Our frontage is being widened.
It is. So you have room enough to widen that. Like,
For compliance with the township codes, we have to take our half of Meeting House Road on the frontage, widen it. Now, the opposite side, obviously, we don't control property that's owned by the church. But that travel lane is the same. We're responsible to widen our half of the road.
so how
Our
much?
curb line is being moved back.
Okay.
The road is being widened, and as we noted, there's, once construction is done, it gets a clean, full overlay, so it's all one, fresh paved surface from our. Yeah, so we don't, the road will not be as narrow as it is today after the fact.
So do you think it's going to be like another 10 feet towards your building wider or so?
Section for the widening, I believe. I believe the road right now is 2 9-foot lanes, and we're widening to a 14-foot lane, 5 or 6 feet.
So when they swing out, they'll have to get over here. Some probably they'll have to watch and make sure.
I don't believe, I think we have the waiver to allow for the wider opening on the street.
Right.
To go to the
Okay.
wider throat for the driveway. Part of that was, even look at the plan, the radius on the north side
Mm-hmm.
is much larger radius than on the south side. Because obviously most of the traffic's gonna go off back to 309. So that right turn movement, that curve is opened up quite a bit to allow that truck to swing, which is why we need the one waiver to allow.
Yeah.
I forget what it is, the maximum opening width of the street line, or I believe it's the standard there. So we opened up that radius to allow that turn.
So when you come down Meeting House Road, over Old State Road, I don't think those roads line up. Because the trucks are always going off the right side of that road. You can see it in the ditch there. It's scuff mark.
Yeah,
There you are, yeah.
they do go. Because it's, yeah, there's an offset that makes it a really strange intersection there.
And that stop sign will stay there, correct? Or is
Yes.
that stuff you're gonna discuss later?
There's no intent to change the stop sign.
Proposed change.
Do we have any reviews from what was McMahon?
There was one a while ago, and I don't recall if there was an updated review with the new layout.
What's,
I will certainly bring these couple.
what is their?
Yeah.
I'll bring
And I
these
do.
questions up to them.
Yeah, okay. I do, as a neighbor, I do envision it having a Wawa there. And a lot of truck drivers down there, that we're gonna have pedestrians. We're gonna have a new dynamic to our community here with people heading on up there to grab a cup of coffee and a sandwich, you know, that are waiting around or whatever. I think it's going to get interesting with that road the way it is and all that. I don't know what that's going to do. It's going to create opportunity for friendships, but I think there's going to be a dynamic there happening that I just think shouldn't be ignored. Because like I said, we got young families, we got their kids living right there on the corner, and it's, you know, I know we're going to end up having to do something there, I'm sure, just with the dynamics of that, which would be part of it.
If the developer was amenable, would you allow them to plant trees on your property for screening?
Yeah, I think I would. I would love to talk about it if that would be, huh? Yeah, or a fence or something, because to me, even a fence would be better for the headlight situation and even the lighting, the general lighting, if we can't have the dimming system. I just think that's gonna,
Alvin, where do you want? That's Julie, that's the trees.
well, I mean, our property comes all the way down here to the church, basically. And so just, now we're just thinking of all this truck traffic coming out. There are lights and everything just sweeping up through here. We got families living right there that if we had, you know, a nice PVC fence or something solid, not a chain link, that would just kind of make it, that's their times over there, and our families that, you know, there's two families living in that house and then us next door that they, with their kids being outside and stuff, if they just had that a buffer there of some sort, it would create a good situation, a better situation, I think. But yeah, and then I guess another concern that we have, and it's a vague concern that hasn't been researched much by me yet. But I'm only talking from hearsay now, but there's different ones have said that the units, whatever runs them, Freon or whatever the gases are, is there hazards pending if something goes wrong, if there's, I heard them talk about, you know, the fire guys look over everything. Is there anything that we should be concerned about? I've heard different ones say about these gases, if they get loose in a certain range, it's a real hazard. If there's residents around, there's zones where it's more hazardous than others. And I just wondered if that had been looked into, or if that's just, if there's any validity to that, or if you've ever heard that, or if there are units, is there a choice of units to go on top of these buildings that are different? Like, are there units that run softer and use different materials that care for the residents around? Or is that not a thing? I know we bought a generator. I bought one 10 years ago. It sounds like a dynamite stick. And I bought one a couple of weeks ago and you can hardly hear it. I didn't know if these units on a bigger scale, if that scales up where, you know, and
Like Bob suggests, I look for something that gets too wide though, that I can do. But on the,
Yeah.
we're not using Freon, same Freon, you have in the refrigerator in your house. I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar
okay.
with any danger. Freon.
good. Cool. Then I think I've hit yeah, I think I basically hit, and Dan hit a lot of my own concerns that I had. So I think I'm done, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing.
I could just interject one thing. So we've had a lot of talk about the buffering and whether or not, you know, there could be more evergreens or not. And they already have a waiver requesting to use smaller trees in the front. Just as a feel from the plan commission, would you have an objection if it ended up being essentially all evergreens or mostly evergreens on the front, on the old state road frontage of the property, kind of scrapping the traditional street tree look to be more, to be added to their buffer plantings?
I would suggest that. itself.
Yeah,
You know, other
Yeah.
parts of the property for the, you know, for the mix, I would agree to, but
if you're using it for naturalization, then the mixes make sense. If
Right.
you're using it for buffering and screening, then one species as dense as you can is going to be more effective than, as you said, a dogwood that's got a branch here and a branch there, and the leaves have to be.
So I think that idea of 2 rows staggered. helps a lot,
Certainly.
too.
Yes.
But also I'd be willing to forego the slope for the berm. You know, the 3-to-1 versus 4-to-1 to get the berm there and to get the berm up and get the trees up high, because at the top of there, you said about a 15-foot cut, right? Okay. Your building's what, 40 or 60?
548.
So you're gonna be kind of looking into that, you know, you'll see the, you had a berm and then trees, you know, on top of the berm. Now you're getting up towards the height of your roof, you know, versus just the trees without the berm.
You have to support steeper slopes that result in.
Personally, I mean, I wouldn't. And do you have room at the top there on Old State from the fence to the roadway to put a berm up there?
We'd have to look at that. I think the concern there would be the berm would be in the public right of way, so do we have the authority to berm that? Not on our side. I mean, it's a township owned street, so I guess maybe that question would go back to you guys. If
Yeah.
you want us to berm it and give us the authority to drop some material in there, yes, but currently our proposal is to just cut in the wall and leave the right of way, you know, as it is, because that's a public. I think. See any opposition to dumping some topsoil up there, if you guys want us to do that in your right.
Yeah, I didn't know how much you owned up there, what you're
I
doing.
mean,
Put
it's
there
a
and
15-foot wall, so there's tiebacks, so the wall's 15 foot away from the right of way line, because we need to be able to cut, you know, these stack block walls have tieback in them. So you can't put them right on the property line. But we typically just leave that area flat at the top of the wall, but, you know, if you want us to mount up some topsoil. we can.
And is there room to do berm on Meeting House?
Yeah, well, specifically meeting houses, what I was referring to is
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
on a meeting house.
The northern half above the driveway, that parking lot isn't gonna be visible from you guys, because like from where your house is on the corner over, that parking lot's 10 foot below the wall. So the whole parking lot will be hidden. I'd have to look at the grades there. The road's high and it slopes down a little bit to the top of the wall. That's another area where we'd have to look at if we steepen the slope up from that 4-to-1 to the 3-to-1. How much room does that buy us to then maybe put a 4-foot berm in or something? We'd have to look at the grading opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. You'd probably get something low in there. I don't know that you'd even get a 4-foot berm, but there may be some opportunity.
The parking lot to me isn't a huge concern there, because that parking lot, I don't think you guys will see a single car, because that.
I'm not talking about screening the parking lot, I'm talking more about screening the view of the building. Yeah, the parking lot's gonna be below, you won't see the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Are there lights along Old State Road in front of the building? I didn't see the lighting diagram, sorry. Old State is the upper one.
The north side.
Yeah, I think we have some security lighting on the building, just to light that zone between the building and the wall, but I believe those lights are low, so they're just safety lighting at that side of the building. It's completely light, yeah, the building.
Could they be on the inside of the retaining wall? So they're not shining out, they're shining in?
Well, what we can look at, from an electric standpoint, it's usually easier to feed them from the building. But we can look to make sure that they're mounted below the wall. So even though they're on the building shining out and down, they wouldn't shine over the top of the wall, they would be below the top of the wall. So they'd be hidden in that sense. That's probably the easiest way to
If you
handle
ran a
that.
condo behind that retaining wall, you could even feed it with a glass wire. And then shine it into the building. It would be less like pollution going out from the building.
So I think the wall would be a cutoff in either scenario. And we can we can talk about it with the architect and the MEP as well as have a electric from that area.
The neighbors prefer a fence on Old State Road or shrubbery? We can't see what's left of the city. Fences, but I heard Alex say we need to put fence up there. I don't mind putting a fence, but the fence looks pretty ugly.
Make it have to have a fence.
Yeah, have to have a fence. You can't have anything
Can't
fall.
do shrubbery.
You do both.
You can do shrubbery to screen the fence, but shrubbery doesn't stop somebody from falling. That's the problem.
Do the height of the wall.
Yeah, okay.
Anything 30.
For a parent.
So you want to consider doing buffering plantings above the wall on Old State?
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, you have plantings up there
Yes.
already. It's just a matter of,
I believe those are probably mostly street.
right, but I think we already talked about the township would be amenable to,
But if Old
alternate
State would
plantings.
Have a single deciduous street tree and it was just a double stacked row of evergreens or something like that, that would be more amenable. Especially on the road frontages to, what we said, a traditional like boulevard street. tree.
Right.
It's like,
I think that's what you're hearing. Yes.
Block it off. Make them 30-foot. You have anything else there, Steve?
I do not.
Now we're gonna move forward.
So no more comment on the Durstein project? All right, we're going to move forward with the meeting. Next thing on the agenda. Yeah, we're not voting on it.
Just table.
Next on the agenda is old business. I don't have any old business. Anyone have anything?
I have one thing. In the minutes from June 11th that we approved last month, that was the. One quick, and I just happened to think about it because I was going past it. When he talked about the draft of the electronic sign ordinance, he talked about the exemption for religious organizations, but didn't we also say about veterans organizations because of the VFW?
Yes.
Yes, but it's a moot point because Mary said it's illegal to single out the churches and the VFW, so we can't do that.
Yeah.
But you did talk about it, but
Okay, because it wasn't, and it just talked about religious and permit churches to install it, didn't say about veterans organizations. So, okay. That's the only thing I have.
Anything else?
well, I mean, we have.
Do we want to do something about the, Telford Borough?
Delbert, did you get a copy of the plans?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it. I think it's easy enough. I could explain to you what they're doing. They're ultimately asking for a waiver. That's all.
They want to build that building.
They need to build 2 buildings for PFAS treatment. Probably carbon-based treatment if they're feasible.
Yeah, it said GAC in there somewhere,
Yeah.
I think.
But there's two of well, 5 and well 7. Well, I get the 2 mixed up. One of them's on County Line Road. It sits way back off the road.
That's well 5.
Yeah, that's well 5. So they're gonna put a building, they own that property outright. They're gonna put building, if you're looking back at the little well house, they're gonna put a building on the right-hand side. We-
The whole property there.
Yeah, they could use all the trees they cut down for the curb.
And we asked them to move that building forward to eliminate some zoning setback problems. So they're gonna adjust the building to be there. What is it? It's that one's a 48 by 32 foot wide building. The other one, well, 7 is over off of Revenue Drive, so behind the original North American Drager office building. That's an easement on North American Drager's property, but they own like a 2-acre easement back there. Similar thing, it's a 40 by 28 foot wide building. That one doesn't have any zoning issues because it sits right in the middle of the property. So. Yeah, so they're gonna ask for, or they are asking for a waiver of land development for those two buildings. I did look at it cursory for zoning issues with Greg, because we found a setback issue on well 5, but they said they couldn't move the building.
You're roughly what, 3,000 square feet?
Yeah, because of the size of their properties, they're gonna meet the stormwater exemption criteria, so it's really non-issues, and it's a matter of public.
Are they gonna move the existing building?
No, the little well houses will stay
That's gonna be-
in addition to the side of each one. But they run the pipe in and through.
Is there any reason not to approve any development?
No,
This is a federal, correct? Is it PFAS?
Yeah.
ultimately, yeah, they're essentially have 5 years to come up with their treatment plans and get under limits. I don't know what their limits are at now. Where they're at.
Right.
But obviously they're above the future limit.
Right.
Or they wouldn't be building these buildings.
Sure they wouldn't. All right. You want us to take action here or?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I think we go on the
All
record.
right, so somebody want to make a motion to recommend waiving land development for the, what are we calling this?
Well 7 and well 5.
5 and 7?
Yep.
Filter houses, also motion.
I'll say.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. Do you have any old business, Steve?
I don't think so. We got that sign. I think that was the last time we had a sign. We signed a couple other ones. That's actually under construction if you've been down by Hidden Meadows.
Which one's that?
Yeah, I was back
HP.
there. Yeah, I was back there the other day.
They're not, HP is not building the units. Toll Brothers is actually constructing it.
Really?
You know, they bought HP is building the improvements, Toll Brothers building the units. For what it's worth, that's how it ended up.
All right, I don't have any new business either. What else? All right.
Tony, any comments?
You don't know what happened at the zoning hearing.
Bill?
For the-
All right.
Yeah, did any of you guys go to the zoning hearing for the the pump station?
No.
I forgot to ask Greg.
What happened with it?
I don't know. I forgot to ask Greg
It
about it.
was approved.
Okay,
It was approved.
Yeah.
I assumed it would be. I just didn't know what conditions they might have put on it.
Who is the zoning hearing board now?
We even know. I mean, I've seen the names, but I can't remember.
Is board-
Todd. Fred's not on it.
No.
Right?
I used to work with, it's like, don't tell me. I'll remember it eventually. I said, Dave, I understand as you get older, that Rolodex keeps getting bigger and bigger. He's like, yeah, exactly. I said, but you know, Dave, if you know what a Rolodex is, you've admitted to being old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. Just the old.
My buddy said, it's only a problem when you don't know you're forgetting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We got somebody,
yeah.
motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
My initial reaction was 2.5 minutes was up 30 minutes ago. But I think you made the right decision letting it go.